Hello and welcome. If you're new to my channel, my name is Christina, and this week's video I wanted to show you a bedroom makeover plus some really fun, easy DIY projects. I'm going to talk you through my techniques, so let's jump into the video. My husband and I recently moved into an old heritage home, and now we're really looking forward to redesigning the rooms with new makeovers. I've already started the front entry as well as the upstairs entryway. Now I want to move into these bedrooms and give them a whole new refresh look. This is the biggest bedroom on the upstairs. This is the master, and what I want to do is give it a lot more of an airier and fresher look. Understanding what you're going to be putting on your wall should always be done in samples. Now for this room, because it's where we're going to be sleeping, I really need a nice, cool, calming color. So I'm just putting some samples out on the walls to see, based on the lighting and the natural light of this room, what I feel would work really well. And it's not too dark, but then it's not too white. I'm also taking a look at what I currently have in stock, based on paint colors I've used in the past and still have ample amount of paint. So I'm just trying to execute what I can work with without having to spend a lot and see what can work in the natural light of the room. I've gone ahead and used London Fog, which is by Benjamin Moore, and I generally will paint everything in the Regal Select. I really love the ultra matte finish because I don't want the light to reflect the imperfections. This is a 130-year-old home, and there's a lot of little dings and knocks, so the more I can have a less reflecting on my paint, the better. So the ultra matte is the perfect balance for this home. I also like to take the face plates of the electrical and light switches because you can do so many different creative things with those, which I'll get into in just a few moments. I still have some leftover Benjamin Moore in the Chantilly lace, and it's a pretty white, so I figured, you know what, I'm going to use that up before I buy any more so I can apply that to the ceiling. The London Fog is a beautiful, very earthy and natural tone in this paint color. It almost has a very light tint of green to it. I wanted to go with something that I could play with the room and the room design as time goes by, so I really wanted to stick with something very neutral and reflective, but for a calming atmosphere. I generally will paint the walls, and if you have a really good synthetic brush with a nice angle to it, you can actually hand paint your walls, and this will eliminate how many coats you need to put on. This is just what works for me, but you can use a roller if that's easier for you. If you use a good quality premium paint, and again going back to the ultra matte flat finish, you're not going to see any brush strokes, so that's also a really big bonus about using the flat matte style paints. Now the room sizes are huge in this home, as well as extremely tall. Upstairs they run about 12 feet in height, and downstairs about 14 feet in height. Now because of the height, I'd really like the paint to amplify how beautiful and tall and all the craftsmanship that is with these beautiful old heritage homes. I'm still going to continue on with the baseboards like I have in my other rooms that I've started so far, using that nice flat ultra matte finish in the onyx black. Now because I'm using that ultra matte finish, it's really going to deflect all those little imperfections due to the age, but it's still going to have a nice fresh look. For some of you who are already following me know that we've recently taken on a new addition, Hatley, which is the litter brother of our current dog, Raphael. He doesn't go down the stairs very well, so we're going to make some room adjustments and kind of switch things around so our dogs don't have to use these stairs as often as they have been, just to make it a little safer. So Ryan's office will go downstairs and I will be working upstairs. Now there are some areas within this home that are actually not sanded down from its original plaster. Painting this with the hand brush definitely came in a lot easier. And again, just using that really good angle brush, you're able to run across where your white paint is versus your color paint, and you can avoid using a lot of extra tape. I find working with a nice neutral balance for your ceilings and your walls is a great way to start, and it makes it less overwhelming when you are doing room makeovers. With a new fresh canvas, then you can get into more designs and pattern as well as color. Our cat Dimitri was not very happy about being kicked out of his favorite room as we continued on with our painting project. Removing a lot of the brown as well as the different colors of green and cream throughout the room, just to create this neutral palette to get started on other executions of DIYs and room design. This is a great way to make it feel a little less overwhelming. Putting a whole new room design can feel like a lot, but taking things into stages makes it feel a lot less overwhelming. So getting that fresh paint on, going with something that's neutral and calming, and then get into the next stages of putting all of the room together. But it doesn't have to be done all at once. But having a fresh palette like a brand new canvas board can definitely feel like you can start to really execute your next ideas. I'm really looking forward to putting more design and color and implementing more composition to each room, but starting with that neutral palette is a great way to make it feel less overwhelming. For the electrical plates, I'm going to use Krylon's Color Max Paint and Primer. Flat black is great because it's going to just go neutral and it's just going to take the brown off. I recommend just to make sure to clean the electrical plates first before you apply the paint, so that way the adhesion will work really well. Removing tape is so satisfying, and I love the straight lines and the fresh new paint. It makes the room feel new again. But it's also new in creating new designs, new compositions, and new patterns, maybe even making my own wallpaper, which I'd love to show how to do that. All the trim, as well as the window frames and doors, are all going to be having the onyx black. And I just think it looks beautiful, it looks very regal, and it's really easy to cover up the brown without doing multiple coats. And again, just using a really good angle brush and matte paint, you're not going to have any brush strokes and you'll be able to avoid having to use a lot of tape. I'm really enjoying the contrast of this London fog and the onyx black. So I'm using up what I already have, and that includes the curtain rods as well as curtains. I think in the future I'd actually like to make my own curtains and find some really nice patterns as well as some new colors. But I have a lot of neutrals and I want to recycle up what I have. As many of you know, this stuff can get expensive, and if you already have something worth using, try to use what you have before we go and buy more. So as I say, I'm just going to see what I can do just to put the room together with what I currently have, and I'm really looking forward to being able to create some new styles, designs, and some colors, features to really pull this room together. But I think I have a really good base going on. I always say, start with what you have, and that's exactly what I've done with my room makeover. With what I already owned and what I could pull together, including the paint, and it's amazing of the transformation you can make and get your room makeover started. With so many more ideas I plan to do with many of my rooms, this is a really good canvas to start with. So I'm really looking forward to sharing more of the journey of what the things you can do to put more additions to your room and create more. So I'm having a whole new revelation with fabrics, because fabrics can make such beautiful designs for your room spaces, not only for your curtains and other tactiles for around your home, but you can also make art just from using fabrics. And what I've done in previous tutorials is even just put it into frames. But you can go to local fabric stores and go to their back shelves and you'd be surprised what amazing deals you can find. So I'm able to get 2 meters of this fabric to fit a 4 by 5 foot canvas board, and in total it only cost me $6. It's not difficult. You could use any frame, or you can even build a frame just using some plywood. I currently already have these canvas boards, but I thought this would be a great way to play with some designs, some textures, as well as some colors. And this way I can play with my room designs as I start to execute them more and more. So again, just playing with new ideas and being able to kind of control your rooms and making it less daunting and overwhelming. So using these kind of styles and this kind of DIY can allow you to kind of add and take away without having to redo a whole wall. Canvas boards are not generally that heavy. This one is a little bit on the bigger side. You certainly don't have to make one this big. And again, I'm just working with what I have. But for the house that I live in, we actually have picture rails. So these are some wires and hooks in which we have to place in order to hang up these canvas boards. But as you can see, I was able to pick up some really amazing fabric and all different color choices and all different kinds of designs. So this is going to allow me to play with my room designs as I keep curating each room and as I get further into my room designs. And I can have fun playing with these and moving them around without a lot of work or a lot of manual labor. Putting a stretch of fabric is very much like almost tightening on a canvas to a frame. So you're just going to kind of stretch the fabric. You're just going to want to fold the fabrics at the corner, almost like wrapping a gift. But what I found the easiest was to actually just put a staple, 1 or 2, on all sides and then kind of pull the fabric nice and tight. And of course you want to make sure that your design is in line with your frame, so that way it won't be crooked. I'm just going to be using these brackets to put onto the back of the canvas. That way I can use those wall hangers, the wire ones that I showed a little bit earlier, to be able to hang these up on those picture frame rails. Again, I just wanted to show a really cool way that you could add texture, color, and design into your rooms. But it's so much easier just to start with that neutral palette and then kind of work your way in each room. And maybe by having a few different fabrics or a few different canvas boards or picture frames, this way you can start to play around and be able to move it around until you've decided what you would like to execute for each room. So there's so many choices, and really have fun with it so it can feel a lot less overwhelming. The beautiful part about using the fabrics as well is you can switch them out. So when you've wanted to make any changes and you wanted to use this even as a piece of art and you want to change those colors around, it is so easy to do. You don't have to go and buy new art, or you don't have to go and repaint your wall. You can just swap out your fabrics and you can have fun with your rooms and your spaces. One of my favorite DIYs is finger crochet, and it's probably my most requested DIY on my channel. So I'm going to be using 3 skeins at the same time to create a super chunky thick throw, just doing a finger crochet. And the beautiful part about a finger crochet is you don't need any tools other than the wool or yarn of your choice. By adding 3 at a time, I can create a super thick, and this will stitch up very quickly, and I want to demonstrate how easy it is to do. So the first thing we'll do is create a slip knot to create that chain to start this blanket. So you're going to start it all at the same time, and to make a slip knot, I just literally make a circle all the way around 3 fingers and pull my working yarn through, and now I have a loop. And that loop, now I can grab that working yarn and start pulling it through the loop. And I'm going to chain on, for my blanket size, 45 loops. So you're just pulling it through, and really what it's going to look like is a long braid. So just keep pulling the working yarn through until you have a chain of 45. This is going to give you a medium to large size blanket. So depending how big you want your blanket will depend how many you're going to chain on and create your start loops. But using the 3-in-1 to create a thick chunky blanket is perfect to keeping it inexpensive and making beautiful decor. So the top bump of the braid is actually going to be the start stitch. So as you can see here, I'm just using my fingers and I'm creating a simple single crochet. There's only a couple of really basic rules with single crochet. But what you're doing is, because you're using 3 yarns at the same time, those 3 is considered kind of a 1. So I have 1 loop on my finger, and now I'm going into my chain with my finger. And again, I'm just using that top bump of the braid. So the braid's kind of on its side, and I'm pulling it through to make my single crochet. So you have 1 loop on your finger, you're going to go in your chain, now you're going to have 2 loops on your finger. Then I use my thumb and I pull the working yarn through, and I've created a single crochet. So I'm going to keep going all the way down my chain to make my first row of stitches. And that's the basis of this entire blanket. And again, it will stitch up extremely quickly, so this will only take a few hours to create. But as you can see, as you put your first crochet and make your first chain of stitches, you actually have a braid on the top, and that's what we're going to be stitching into as the blanket starts to continue. But once we get into the second row, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. But as you can see, working with the 3 separate skeins of yarn is actually really easy. So continue on to make your first chain of single crochets. And there's going to be one little step at the end of the chain that's going to be pretty important. So still working on my first chain of single crochets, you can see that there's actually still 2 stitches to do. And think of back when you first started your slip knot, that is still going to be considered part of the chain. So you're definitely going to want to make a single crochet in that slip stitch at the very beginning. Once you're done your first row of single crochets, the one important rule is to remember is, once you've done that stitch, is to actually take the working yarn and make another loop. You need to do that at the end of every single row that you create. So once you make that extra loop, I always turn my project so I can start my next row, which is now going to be my second row of single crochets. Now you're going to be stitching into what you've already made, and you'll notice that there's 2 bumps at the top. So the braid is almost at the side. You're going to make sure that you're actually putting your finger in there, because your finger is the crochet hook. And that's where you're going to be now stitching into. So those 2 bumps at the very top of the row of each row that you're making. So now you're going to go and make that single crochet again. And this is one of the most important, is to remember that you're going into both, so that both sides. So there's 2 bumps up there, you're going into both. Grab that working yarn with your finger, pull your loop through. Now you have 2 loops on your fingers, and you'll pull the working yarn through, and that's your single crochet. If you're new to single crochet or finger knitting of any kind, trust me, it's a lot easier than you think. And if you need to slow down this video and just go step by step, you can follow along really easily. So I'm going to continue on with my second row of single crochets. And I also want to point out the most important factors of creating the single crochet pattern. So again, just remember, you've got those 2 bumps at the top of your single crochets. Always make sure that you are using your finger through both of those. So you're grabbing that loop, and you had one on your finger, pull the working yarn through, and that is the single crochet. It's really easy. You can always just try a little sample of 10 stitches and make a few rows until you understand the pattern if you are new. Now, the only trick with any type of crochet, you could be using a crochet hook or your finger, is understanding that the last stitch is kind of off to the side a little bit. And you want to make sure that you're picking that up, because if you don't, your blanket will start to go into a little bit of a V, and you want to kind of keep your edges as straight as possible. So I just want to show you quickly here that if I stop there, my blanket, as you can see, will start to kind of bend into a V. But if I pick up this last stitch off to the side on every single row, my blanket, as I keep making my rows of stitches, will be nice and straight. That's one thing that I did incorrectly when I learned how to crochet in general. Again, whether you're using a crochet hook or you're just using your fingers. So definitely want to make sure of that. And the other thing to always make sure of is to add that extra loop at the end of each row. Really what that is you've already started your next stitch. Now, the reason you're making the extra loop at the end of each row is you've actually already made the first stitch. So you're not going into that first loop that you see my finger at, you're actually going into the second loop. So that's just the way the crochet pattern works. I used to go into the first loop and it would start to bulk up and look funny on the sides. So just make sure as you continue on after your first row that when you're starting from the right side to the left side, just go into that second stitch. So I'm just going to show you quickly again. You want to make sure that you're picking up that last stitch that's kind of off to the side there at the end of each row with your single crochet. Once you've done that single crochet, don't forget to add that extra loop. And again, that extra loop that you've created is going to be the first stitch of your next row. So here we are ready to start another new row. I've already made my extra stitch. I'm just going to go into the second loop on that row. And those are all the basic rules of everything you need to know on how to make this super thick, beautiful, chunky throw blanket. I find it so relaxing to make these super thick, chunky throws, and they stitch up so quickly. When you want to add on new yarn to start your next 3 skeins of yarn, it's really easy. So I'm just going to show you quickly how you're going to attach your already yarn that's ending to your new yarn, and you're just going to tie it into a knot. I will generally actually tie it twice, so I'll make 2 small knots, and the 2 tails that remain, I just cut them off with scissors, and as soon as you start to stitch it up, because it's so thick and bulky, you won't even see them. Each ball of yarn that you're using is not going to end at the same time, but don't worry about it. Just attach the new ball of yarn as each one ends. It won't apply to any concern when you start a new one. So if you start a new ball out of the 3 a little bit sooner than the other 2, it won't make any difference to the overall blanket. I make sure to use up all of the actual ball of yarn. So even if one starts a little bit sooner than the other one, it won't matter to the overall blanket. So don't really concern about that at all. So the grand total of the amount of yarn was 15 skeins of yarn or balls of yarn, but it really works out because you're using 3 at a time. It really works out that if it was all in one, it's really 5. So it's just math, but I did buy 15 in order to complete this large throw. Just a recap, make sure that you're stitching that last on the side stitch, and don't forget to chain 1 when you flip your work around. So you're not going in the first loop, you're going to go into the second loop, and then you're going to carry on with your entire row. So when you get to your last row of your throw blanket, I want to show you how easy it is to, quote, cast off, because it's a little bit different than the conventional knitting pattern. Once you get to the very last row, you're going to complete that last stitch in your row, and you're going to basically be left with a loop. And with the loop, what I'll do is just open up that last little loop. Then I'll grab my scissors and cut off any remaining yarn. So I'll give myself a little tail at the end there. Then you're just going to grab that little piece of the tail, wrap it in, and make a knot. And I'll generally make 2 knots at the end of the blanket, and any of the remainder yarn, you just weave it into the blanket because it's so thick you won't even see it. And same goes with the beginning tail. When you first started with your slip knot, you can go and weave that into the blanket as well. So I'm going to be upcycling this little end table to go into my master bedroom, so that way my end tables kind of match. And I found this little table a while back, and I wanted to actually paint it up so it kind of coincide a little bit more symmetry with the one that I already have. So this is a perfect little end table for beside the bed, and I'm just going to use a short-handled little brush so I can get into those tiny little areas. I'm going to be applying 2 full coats of this country gray chalk paint. Each coat that I apply will be on the thinner side, so that way the paint doesn't bulk up and get kind of clumpy into the corners. It goes on a little bit smoother this way, and it allows me to create texture, but texture I can kind of create and control, and it's just not gloopy and messy. Once the 2 full coats are on, I will leave it overnight to dry because I'm going to be using a chalk paint wash in the old white color. I generally find with my own experience, because I usually put the coats on fairly quickly back to back, that it's just easiest to let it dry overnight before I go into my next steps. This way I know that the paint is fully cured onto the piece and it won't pull back on me. From my own personal experience, when I'm painting in the cooler months, because it's wintertime right now, even knowing I have the heat on, it's still cool in the room that I'm working in. So I find that the paint will kind of stagger out about how fast it's going to dry. So that kind of interrupts it a little bit, and I always just find it a lot safer just to go ahead and let that dry. If it's a super warm room or you live in a warm climate, you can probably just let it dry in a couple of hours after 2 coats. But I prefer just to let it dry overnight, and then I can get into my next step, which I'll be doing pretty much a paint wash, but I like to use it with a rag to create this faux texture. So I'll just leave this, let it dry completely, make sure it's fully cured, and then we can get into the next step with old white. So all I'm going to do is just make a 50% paint and 50% wash. That's standardly what I do with any of my paint washes. And then I normally will start with a moist, lint-free cloth. And I'm using a blue shop towel, but you can use anything that something that doesn't carry a lot of lint onto it, because you don't want those little fibers to stick to your paint. I'll apply my paint wash, and then I'm just going to dab it out. So using the texture of the damp cloth, I'm going to be moving that chalk paint wash around. I don't want to actually wipe it back. I want it to stay there, but I want the imprint of what that wet rag is going to leave behind as I go around and dab that paint wash on. For this little end table, I just kind of want that faint kind of wash, weathered look with the old white, but if you wanted it to have a stronger texture or more of a whitewash look, once that's completely dry, go ahead and put a second wash on that. So it really just depends on the desired effects that you're looking for. Once the paint wash is completely dry, and that'll only take, even in a cooler temperature than I'm in, maybe an hour or 2, I'll go ahead with just plain clear furniture wax to seal the paint when I'm done. And you're just going to add it on just like you would a moisturizer to skin. There's some fun furniture pieces that can really update your space and be useful, and all it does is take a little bit of fun with your paint, and you can really create something that you like for your personal space. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, and please, if you have any questions and or comments, leave me a comment in the comment box below. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and hit that notification bell. That's going to tell you when I upload my next video. I have so many more fun DIYs, room makeovers, and furniture transformations to share with you soon. So until then, take care, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you soon. To share a bedroom makeover, plus some DIYs. Are you comfy? Are you okay? Thank you so much for watching this week's video. Are you okay? Are you the star? Are you coming over here? You're such a good boy. Okay. What are you doing? Are you coming over here? Are you coming to say hello? This is, guys. We do this every week. Are you gonna do it? Are you gonna say hello? Are you saying hello? He's such a superstar.